So what do you know about LDS apologetics or apologetics in general? Well, I'm going to talk about that very specifically. We're going to go to an article or discuss where I discussed an article on that was posted on byu.edu, and it was an apologetics article. So welcome to this Mormon Truth video. I imagine you're seeing it on the Dodger Game channel, where true LDS history and doctrine are discussed. So let's get into where I posted what I had to say on Reddit. Fortunately, this is going to go into the vertical mode because that's the only way Reddit reads, but here we go, because got some pertinent stuff here that's pretty important about how LDS apologetics work, and not just LDS. Okay, so here we are going to Reddit. Here we go. So here's what I actually did two similar postings here. Look at George Washington. Hey, what's he doing? This is from the ceiling of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. If you've ever been in a Masonic temple, you will see George Washington. So, okay, here's what I posted. Obfuscating the Luciferian connections between the evolving temple endowment and Joseph Smith's Masonic initiation in Nauvoo by LDS apologists. So in other words, LDS apologists were obfuscating or making it difficult to see the Luciferian connections between the evolving temple endowment and Joseph Smith's Masonic initiation in Nauvoo, which took so what are we talking about there, and what was the article about, and what was the BYU article about, and what's the concern about? Well, basically, the concern is that, Joseph Smith's supposed to be a prophet who spoke with God, and that God revealed to him all kinds of things. I came to visit him in New York just to say, hello, this is my son Jesus, start talking to him, to revealing supposedly the word of wisdom, because Emma didn't like the high priests, high council guys spitting, tobacco spit all over the floor and her having to clean it up, which is pretty understandable. So Joseph could get a revelation anytime he wanted it, but for the temple endowment, we find Freemasonry in it. And so the question becomes very important. Why is that? Did Joseph Smith not get this directly from God? Why is it that he introduced Freemasonry into the temple endowment 7 weeks after becoming a Master Mason, after being initiated in the Nauvoo Lodge? So, which took place like the night, I believe, of March 15th and 16th of 1842. So, so basically he rose to the sublime or third degree there, the top of the Blue Lodge, basically, in Freemasonry. That lodge was established, it says, in LDS history, things that I've looked up, by some York Rite Freemasons. And so what the article did was basically talk about, okay, well, here's how Masonic initiation rites and so forth are similar to the LDS endowment, and then there's ways that are different. So they basically get off on this tangent of how things are similar and how they're different, and that's really not the point at all. The LDS endowment has got elements of Freemasonry in it. It's got elements of other maybe Egyptian Coptic things and stuff out of Genesis in it. So basically the Joseph Smith blend on things. But the important thing is that if he was a true prophet of God, why wouldn't God be just giving him the revelation directly? Why would he have to go to some organization? And then Luciferian connection. And that really upsets some Freemasons. But unfortunately for them, there is plenty of mention of Lucifer and Luciferian doctrine within Freemasonry. So this was pretty short, and basically I just stated that the conflict is there, that a prophet of God the God of Israel, would be gaining his knowledge through an organization that basically follows Lucifer. And so I made some notations of that. So I got basically really attacked by some people that were defending Freemasonry, and they made some statements that Lucifer, is just something completely different. Hang on for a moment here. All right, so some of these guys were saying, well, Lucifer's just metaphorical, and on the other one that I put in a different location, I got just really vitriolic language, saying, oh, this is all conspiracy theory, you're off your rocker, you're lying, that kind of thing, but they couldn't seem to state much fact. What they did state is that there was something, that somebody said which was construed, to be a hoax or something. However, Albert Pike wrote, the book, the short name of it is, Morals and Dogma, but we call it the Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And within it, he not only wrote things for the Scottish Rite, but he actually wrote a lot of, history of the doctrines of Masonry coming from the mystery religions, basically, from Egypt, perhaps from Babylon before that. And he talks a lot about, magical practices and Lucifer. So, one guy said, well, it's just a hoax. It's just, Lucifer's just a metaphor. So I went ahead and took this right out of Morals and Dogma. All right. Says Albert Pike. And we'll discuss him later, but he's like, yeah, Mr. Mason. He says, the true name of Satan, the Kabbalists say, is Yahweh. Does that sound familiar? That's the Hebrew God that's supposed to be, Elohim and anyway, or Jehovah. I'm not going to deal with the whole Jehovah thing right now. The true name of Satan, the Kabbalists say, is Yahweh, God, reversed for Satan, is not black God, but a negation of God. The Kabbalah imagined him to be a most occult light. That which we say to be to a crowd is that we worship a God, but it is the God that one adores without superstition. To you, sovereign grand inspectors general, that means 33rd degree Freemasons, that's the name of their title, we say this, that you may repeat to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the high degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. Now pay even more attention. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonay, whose deeds prove his cruelty... Okay, let's just stop there in case you don't know who Adonay is. Adonay is Hebrew for my Lord. It is Yahweh, okay? Yahweh, or YHWH, the Tetragrammaton, which, when we throw some vowels in, was pronounced Yahweh by the Jews. That is the God of the Old Testament. And so that was his name. And so they weren't supposed to say his name, it's too sacred, so they called him God or the gods, which is Elohim. Elohim means God or the gods. Or they called him my Lord, which, in their language, which is Adonay. So what they're saying is, who you consider to be possibly Jesus Christ, he's saying that's who's evil. So if Lucifer were not God, would Adonay, whose deeds prove his cruelty, perfidy, and hatred of man, barbarism and repulsion for science, would Adonay and his priests calumniate him? Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately Adonay is also God. Okay, so that's pretty blatant there. He's calling, he's saying that there are two gods. One is Lucifer, and one is Adonay, who is the Christian God. So, of course, he mentions his cruelty and so forth. And if you read, like Numbers chapter 31 and maybe a lot of other things in the Old Testament, Moses had human sacrifice, that sort of a thing, of his wife's actual relatives sick. So you can't disagree with that if you actually read the Bible, but it does state that he's Lucifer, and in LDS doctrine, Lucifer is a bad guy. In the temple, Lucifer's the bad guy. So it doesn't really work for Joseph Smith to be going to the Masonic religion, basically, as their Grand Poobah has called it, and getting his part of the endowment from these guys who follow Lucifer, who Joseph Smith and most Christians equate with Satan. So that was the problem. And so what I was saying was that the LDS article did everything to avoid the real topic, which is the problem that you've got supposedly the God of Israel's prophet following a creed, not only following them, but obtaining part of the holy endowment for the temple from a group that says they follow Lucifer. I mean, doesn't that, does that ring some alarm bells in your head? So anyway, they avoided saying that. Everything they do is to try to make everything look like it's okay and it's normal. And so that's the same thing, the same tactic I got from a bunch of these guys defending Freemasonry, saying, "Oh man, you're nuts, you're a conspiracy theorist, we don't follow Lucifer," and there it is, right from their guy, and we're not into magic, and so I'm just going to document a little bit of this thing, because basically what they do is try to smear campaign, character assassination, say all kinds of insulting things, but they don't have a whole lot of fact. They did try, a couple of things to obfuscate, but, and say, "Oh, he's all about the Scottish Rite." Who cares? He's writing history. Okay, sure, he does things, ordinances basically for the Scottish Rite, but he was writing Morals and Dogma as a history of the dogma of Freemasonry and tracing it through Egypt, and through mysticism, that it was magical. And so I'm going to cite a couple things that I also put in here. So we're going to go a little bit elsewhere here, and we'll get back to horizontal on this, I think, quickly. So here we go. I'm going to pop into my files, actually on a memo here. Okay, here's a book, and it's written in 2007. Isaac Newton's Freemasonry, The Alchemy of Science and Mysticism. Alchemy is magic, it's like magic and chemistry combined. Alchemy of Science and Mysticism by Elaine Bauer. All right, now, so there we see it, Isaac Newton's Freemasonry. But who is the public? Who wrote this now? Well, Elaine Bauer, a researcher and historian, is past Grand Master of the Grand Orient of France. Let's do this horizontally. Okay, the Grand Orient of France. Like about as high as you can get in a lot of Freemasonic things. He is the author in French of Grand Ode de le Grand Orient de France. I like my French. The foreword to the book is written by Michel Barat, Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of France. That means, the head of Freemasonry in total in France. And the afterword is written by Roger Dachez. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing things. President of the Masonic Institute of France. Okay, so can you get any more authorized, by high-level Freemasonry than that? Okay. Chapter 3 is entitled Newton, Scientist, Alchemist, and Sorcerer. So they're endorsing his Freemasonry, his sorcery, magical practices, and all that sort of a thing as one and the same. And basically what they say in here, and I'm going to go now to where I had eliminated some of the content there just because we don't have to sift through it. I mean, you can easily go look at it yourself. Okay, so here we got, but I wanted to see the the book cover and stuff. Okay, so the alchemy of science and mysticism. Yeah, Isaac Newton's Freemasonry, the alchemy of science and mysticism. Written by super high-level Freemasons and saying that, it's all magic. Okay, and so why didn't you hear that in school? Well, they basically concealed that. But going down here, great major contributor to the content, I suppose here, Verlet, says Newton's known work comprises, 1.4 million words relating to theology, religion. Okay, I thought didn't you think he was just a scientist? Like discovered gravity. 500,000 to alchemy, in other words, magic and chemistry and all that sort of thing, trying to make, things magically, like turn lead into gold or pull a Rumpelstiltskin. And 150,000 to monetary affairs. He was involved, like, with the British monetary system. He was, Sir Isaac Newton. Sir, meaning he was, titled. And 1 million to scientific problems. So basically what they said here is, look at this. But by hiding his secrets away, it wasn't popular with the church to say you were into magic. Newton the Magus, meaning the magician, also hid the alchemical, hermetic, and esoteric dimensions which elucidated, means put light upon, his research. Okay, so from this point of view, victorious science made its complex matrix disappear. So in other words, those who published the books left out the part, about him being a magician. Kind of like they left out the parts of various other guys, like that contributed maybe to Darwin's theories. I don't know, Swedenborg, Hegel, Kant, whatever. So they left out the part, they keeps the parts where it talks about survival of the species, but he leaves out the part where he says they tell him that it was revealed by from a seance with men on Saturn, because that doesn't sound quite the way they want to have it sound in science. So and I'm going to skip over and something else I got out of Albert Pike's Morals and Dogmas, 861 page book. So, you got the quotes about Lucifer, and then they try to knock them, but it's pretty hard to do. And so, there's... I clicked into some chapters there, and so in the chapter on Master of the Royal Secret, that's a degree of Freemasonry. Here's some of the things we see. Okay, the occult science of the ancient magi, in other words, the ancient magicians, was concealed under the shadows of the ancient mysteries. It was imperfectly revealed, or rather disfigured by the Gnostics. That's basically kind of a version of the Christians, early Christianity. It is guessed under the obscurities covered, pretended crimes of the Templars. In other words, the Catholic Church had had the Templars with them, and then they killed them. They, Friday the 13th, burned Jacques de Molay at the stake. So, de Molay happens to be a young men's organization for the Freemasons now. The Templars founded the enigmas of the impenetrable the rites of the highest masonry. What do we got here? And is found enveloped in enigmas that seem impenetrable in the rites of the highest Freemasonry. Magism, and it was the science of Abraham and Orpheus, of Confucius and Zoroaster, like Zoroastrianism, it was the dogmas of this science that were engraven, blah, 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 I talk about Moses, so, and the Holy Kabbalah. So basically what you see is we've got a merging of Christianity and magic. Okay, he goes on to say, the celebrated order of the Templars that became for all the secret associations of the Rosicrucians, in other words, Rosicrucians, of the Illuminati, of the Hermetic Freemasons. The reason of their strange rites and their signs more or less conventional. And this one, magic is that which is, it is by itself, like the mathematics, it is the exact and absolute science of nature and its laws. Yeah, that's right. This is Albert Pike. What does he talk about here? See if anything sounds familiar, LDS people. The primary tradition of the single revelation has been preserved under the name of Kabbalah by the priesthood of Israel. Oh, I thought we were somewhere else. Magic unites in one and the same science whatsoever philosophy can possess, that all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole in the gospel. It is not in the Buddhism of the ancients that we must look for the footprints of science and rediscover the mysteries of knowledge. The priests of Egypt knew it better than we do. Oh, I missed one somewhere where they were talking about the priesthood, and at any rate, are we seeing magic? Are we seeing magic equated with science and Freemasonry? Yeah, we are. So everything they tried to say was like, you know, some kind of propaganda, conspiracy theory. It's, you know, it's right in Morals and Dogma. And Albert Pike was a very bright man. He was, you know, a man who wrote a lot of history, and so it's not just for the Scottish rite of Freemasonry. He wrote the roots that came from the mystery schools. Oh, that's what I wanted to find. Oh, ancient mysteries. And the sciences originally concealed the sanctuaries. The Elohim. Hey, that sounds familiar. Tree of knowledge of good and evil became the tree of death. For 6,000 years, the martyrs of knowledge. Anyway, the mystery schools is where he said it came from. Wish I could have shown that one. Anyway, supposedly the opposite of Christianity, you know, is what we're told by the Catholic Church, essentially, and then its offspring in Protestantism. So what is supposed to be opposites, apparently it seems to be blended by Joseph Smith and others, and apparently was in the beginning together, as according to Albert Pike anyway, that Christianity and magic were one. And evidently with Joseph Smith they were. Obviously he was a magician with his, you know, seer stone long before he was making claims to you know, being deciphering plates through his seer stone. Okay, so how does the whole apologetic thing work? Well, what we see is that they try to make things appear in a way that is not compatible with what they really are. Having to do with Albert Pike and his ability to write authoritatively about Freemasonry and its origins, I wanted to go ahead and document just a little bit more here. One of the reasons is because I was attacked by Freemason defenders in the article mentioned, and some of the things I was being affronted with were, oh, he only had to do anything with the Scottish Rite, and it didn't apply to anything but the Scottish Rite, and you know, all this sort of thing. So let's look a little bit at this. Okay, so here we go. Here's Albert Pike. Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike here. And who published it? It was published by the Supreme Council of the 33rd Degree for the Southern Jurisdiction of the United States. Okay, in 1871. And they handed it out like candy for about 103 years. That sounds pretty approved. Okay, so Morals and Dogma. And that's where he writes all this Masonic history coming from the ancient mystery religions and that sort of thing. So he's like the most celebrated Freemason ever, despite the kind of trash that I caught on Reddit from certain defenders there, and they said he only had to do with the Scottish Rite. But as we look at his history, when he was 41 years old is when he got involved with Freemasonry, and it says Pike took the 10 degrees of the York Rite from 1850 to 1853. Okay, so he had plenty of experience with the York Rite, which, you know, so you had the York Rite and the Scottish Rite in America, if you're white. If you're black, then that would be Prince Hall Masonry, which came about the same time pretty much as the Scottish Rite. Scottish Rite was 1783. Okay, there we go, 1783. So, anyway, he becomes like the grand poobah of the Scottish Rite. But just before then, I suppose, right about that time when he was on the Supreme Council, he was asked to kind of redo some of the rituals for the Scottish Rite, which he did, because the York Rite was upset that he was revealing some of their secrets in the 29th and 30th degrees, as I'm showing to you there. Okay? Revealing some of their secrets, which he obviously knew. Okay, so he writes Morals and Dogma, and it's pointed out here that Morals and Dogma is quite separate from the work that he did revising the rituals. Okay? Very carefully pointed out that that was a separate book, and it's a completely separate matter. So, what he wrote basically as a historian of Freemasonry and its Egyptian roots and so forth, from the Babylonian priesthood, Egyptian priesthood, the mystery schools, was from his extremely high knowledge of all of Freemasonry, and he, of course, had obtained the degrees there to the 10 degrees of the York Rite. So, yeah, I'm discrediting those who tried to discredit me. How about that? So, there we go. And what was it said? Morals and Dogma was traditionally given to the candidate upon the receipt of the 14th degree of the Scottish Rite. This practice was stopped in 1974. Morals and Dogma has not been given to candidates since then, and some people lament that, it says. Okay. Oh, Pike is best known for his major work, Morals and Dogma, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Published in 1871, Morals and Dogma should not be confused with Pike's revision of the Scottish Rite ritual. They are separate works. Walter Lee Brown writes that Pike intended it, meaning Morals and Dogma, to be a supplement to that great connected system of moral, religious, and philosophical instruction that he had developed in his revision of Scottish ritual. Okay, quick break here. Okay, I wanted to review this, which I didn't get to in the statement, where it was all about Adonay, you know, in other words, Jesus or Yahweh, and Satan or Lucifer being the opposites here. But I wanted to point out something in addition to that as well. So I'll first handle the first part here. So Pike goes on to say, thus the doctrine of Satanism is a heresy, and the true and pure philosophical religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonay. But Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonay, the God of darkness and evil. So the Jewish God is the God of darkness and evil. That was Elohim, or Adonay. Okay? The Hebrew God that the Roman God, Jesus Christ, basically got blended into in Roman Catholicism and the Trinity and all that sort of thing. And of course, so he was called Elohim, he was called Adonai, so they wouldn't say his real name Yahweh, because they didn't want to make him mad, because if you make him mad, he might flood the earth and kill you all, or something like he did when he got mad before. So the Roman Catholics in the 13th century came up with a new name for him, a new name made up of these titles, my Lord, which is Adonai, and, you know, the gods, Elohim. They made up a new name for him. And it turned out to be like Yahweh, and evolved into Jehovah. So I've discussed that later, since it's so weird that, of course, over 3,000 years before the name's invented, Joseph Smith's got him in the book of Abraham saying, yeah, Abraham, my name's Jehovah, coming down to save you, in Abraham chapter 1. So, yeah, Jehovah didn't exist. But here we've got Adonay, who would be like Jehovah or whatever, in Mormonism, the Jesus Christ in Christianity, and he's the bad guy, and Lucifer is the good guy here as far as Albert Pike and Freemasonry is concerned. So that may not sit well with Christians or Mormons, because for Joseph Smith to be involved with basically a religion, as Albert Pike terms it, the Luciferian religion, and Lucifer's the good guy and Jesus is the bad guy. Lucifer's the god of light, Jesus is the god of evil. So, and of course in the LDS Temple Endowment, Lucifer, is equated with Satan, the bad guy. So Pike is saying that Satanism is basically baloney, made up by the Catholic Church. So there's two things I wanted to say there. So still you've got, you got what you got with Pike there, and Lucifer is not just some sort of a metaphor. He's an individual who is struggling against an equally powerful God, the evil Hebrew God. And earlier he had said, we say to the crowd, this is what we say to the crowd. Let's take a look at that. We have that. Was that up here? Okay. That which we must say to a crowd, in other words, not among ourselves when we're talking about our secrets, is that we worship a God. Basically, but we don't tell who that God is, because it wouldn't go well with the crowd to say it's Lucifer. Okay, so the next thing is, Satanism is something Pike is mentioning here in the 1800s. And when we look at the LDS temples, and we see the inverted pentagram, like on the Nauvoo temple, in the windows and that sort of a thing, or we see inverted pentagrams on the Salt Lake temple, and other things, having to do with church stuff in Salt Lake, even in the children's room inside of Masonic Knights of Maltese cross, which you get in the York Rite. And maybe I should show that too. They've got all kinds of York Rite stuff in their symbology, it looks like. So LDS apologists will say, these aren't satanic when we see these inverted pentagrams on the temples. Satanism was developed by Anton LaVey after that. Well, here we got 1800s, and, Albert Pike, chief, head of the southern jurisdiction, became, head of the northern and, North America, basically, in Masonry, is talking about Satanism. So, sorry, LDS apologists, it didn't just get made up by Anton LaVey, who also was a disciple of Aleister Crowley. So they're, I'm sure, both Freemasons. Aleister Crowley was a Freemason and head of a lodge of Ordo Templi Orientis, known as the most wicked man in the world, and very much a Satanist. So how is it that his student is inventing Satanism? Well, maybe he modernized some things. Anyway, yeah. L. Ron Hubbard was, of course, a disciple too, right? Who invented Scientology, and he was a Freemason. Just a coincidence, and used automatic writing to create some of their scriptures. The occult adepts are those who are heads of many Christian and semi- or neo-Christian religions. Charles T. Russell, Jehovah's Witnesses, Ellen Gould White. No, she wasn't a Mason like everybody else I've mentioned, but she was a Theosophist, which, Lucifer Trust, Lucis Trust, Theosophy, yeah. Helena Blavatsky. So, that's the way it is. Same thing with, whatever, Christian leaders. Billy Graham, Oral Roberts, Robert Schuller, whatever, many others. They're Freemasons, because it's a breeding ground for the mystery religions, for the occult. and all that seems to be related thereto. In the name of the Age of Reason by Thomas Paine, in the name of truth. We'll go to the next subject. The devil is in the details. What we see is that you have to read it yourself. If you take their words for it, you will find you don't have the whole truth. Here's George Washington. Look at what he's doing. The sign given by Baphomet in mirror image. So, why would a Luciferian religion be sought after by Joseph Smith to bring into what is supposed to be a place of holiness to the Lord, as it says in front of the temples? And then what is holiness to the Lord? That's magic. And I covered that in another video. We can see what's on the front of the temples where it says holiness to the Lord is actually the name of a magical parchment that Joseph Smith and his family had. I think it was Hiram's parchment, actually. Amazing. Obfuscating, in other words, camouflaging the connections between the evolving temple endowment and Joseph Smith's Masonic initiation in Nauvoo. Yes, he had Luciferian connections and connections with all sorts of magical material. And the apologists want us to look the other way, and they try to make everything seem normal, just like the guys who were defending Freemasonry in this tried to make everything look different. But then I finally brought up the fact that, as long as you're mentioning satanic, slitting your throat, having your tongue pulled out by its roots, or being disemboweled is not exactly, godly or good or holy. It's evil, and it is satanic. And those are, the penalties for revealing all sorts of signs, tokens, and so forth, keywords, handshakes from Masonry. Those were the Masonic penalties, and those were copied into the LDS Endowment. How is that not evil? And then I brought up, how Captain William Morgan was murdered by Freemasons who had sworn to murder any of each other who gave up the secrets of their, secret handshakes and so forth. So he was murdered for it because he wrote a book on it. And of course, Joseph Smith hooked up with his widow after she'd remarried, I think. After she'd remarried, when she was speaking with Sarah Pratt, Orson Pratt's wife, who was upset and went to talk with her friend, Mrs. Harris, who was not a member of the church, but Sarah was upset because Joseph was hitting on her, tried to get her into the bedroom while her husband was away on a mission. And she shared her problem with with Mrs. Harris, who said, "You're a fool. I've been his mistress for 4 years." Yeah, his mistress for 4 years. Church shows that Joseph Smith, I believe, on Family Search, is sealed to Mrs. Harris. She wasn't even a member of the church, but they had to do something to make it look okay. It's known that she was one of his women. So, yeah, one of the 11 of them that are other guys' wives that shows sealed to Joseph Smith. Right. And she wasn't even a member of the church. So, had she revealed some things to Joseph Smith before he got into, before he legitimized things a little bit? They got the Nauvoo Lodge going on so that they could make Masons really quickly. In other words, raise people to the 3rd degree so they could be Master Masons, so that when they were shared certain signs and tokens within the Temple Endowment that Joseph put into the Endowment on May 4th, 1842, they would at least already be Freemasons, so he wouldn't be sharing anything with them that would be breaking the oath and have him killed for that. Of course, I'm not quite sure how that would work with the women. But anyway, he was killed later. So, there we have it. Isn't that faith promoting? The truth just doesn't seem to work really well with, the whole faith thing. I suppose I'll be signing off. It's been a Mormon Truth video. You can get bunches of them on the Dodger Game channel, about 40. It says more than that, but some of them are kind of redos. So, yeah. If it's an LDS history, you want to know about it, very likely may be on here. Contradictions in doctrine, changing doctrines and cover-ups on it. The deception on LDS.org, particularly in the Gospel Topics essays. Yeah, you'll find it here. See how honest they are, guys. I document it, so it kind of, it takes the mystery out. Hope you can like and get in the comment section and subscribe, and hope you're having a really great day.